So this is Erin Jones and
Kushida Begum.
we are great friends and have been for I don't even remember how many years now.
I want to say we met in 2008.
I know it's been almost 10 years. I mean, I figured about 10 years.
Yeah, 2008 at Newbridge Community Church.
Yes.
And I think it took us a while to actually connect. I just gravitated towards
brown people.
Yeah, to you and your family because there was really nobody that was brown and black. Yeah. And I kept sitting behind you, and then I think eventually somehow we just started talking. Oh, and then also Boys and Girls Club.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We kept running into each other
and our
there.
kids. So our kids were in the church Sunday school together.
That's right.
You know, so you'd go pick up your son, and I'd go pick up my kids, and and then same with Boys and Girls Club. We just kept running into each other.
We ran into each other, we talked, and then I think when we really connected was at the North Thurston District office when you were speaking at the PTA / what was it called at that time? Oh my gosh! Now I forgot what it's called.
But it's basically Parents of Color, wasn't it? Oh my!
No, what is the group that it's there now? Not cultural. Okay, it's gonna come back to us. Before we know it. But that's when you spoke, and I was just like, I know you, and you know me, and then we just were exchanged numbers, and I think I was stalking you. I kept calling you.
And we found out that we were both adopted.
Yes. Although I wasn't legally adopted. Right. I was a foster kid. But yeah.
We both had white moms.
And I think just navigating through the schools, and my son is half black, and my frustrations of the church, and then also at the school level. And that's when we kind of really connected.
Right. And then we started doing training together. Because I had been inside the school system as a teacher and administrator. I think I was at OSPI at the time.
Yeah,
when we first met, I was the assistant state superintendent. But as a parent, we realized we were both experiencing the same kinds of problems with our kids in the school system. And so we're like, you know what, better trainers than people who are actually in it.
Yeah, and then we had diversity and, what did we call it at that time? Diversity and, it wasn't called diversity and inclusion.
Cultural competence, I think.
Yeah, that's what it was, cultural competency. Mm-hmm. So we did 3 parts, 3 trainings together. And then I think that's when we really connected. And
then it just started, hey, Erin, I'm making food tonight.
I know.
I got food. Girl, where are you?
Yes.
So I'd run over here from my house or walk over here from my house. Yeah. She'd be like, did you just walk over here? I did. Yeah. I am driving you home because it's dark outside.
I know. And you were trying to, you see her. She wants to be walking. I mean, granted, it's a safe community, but I was like, you're black. You ain't walking nowhere by yourself with a big afro. No. So I would walk you home, and then, And then it's interesting because we didn't really have conversations about what our different faith views were. Mm. That kind of came way later down the road because I was kind of ashamed of, I had gone to this church, was really involved, even became a Sunday school teacher. And I finally went to the pastor and was like, I'm Muslim, but I'm volunteering, and I learned so much from this church. And then we just connected about religion, about, I'm Muslim, but we still remain, there's so many things that even when I went through some traumatic things, you would pray with me, or I would pray with you going through some of your stuff, so.
And that's just never been a factor for us.
No.
It's never.
No. You've never tried to
convert me
or save me and find it, Yeah, and I think the thing that was really helpful for me was the fact that you were able to help me to be a better advocate for my son, who is half black in my race, but he identifies as black, or through the school, the lens of educators, he's black. And so all the different racism that he experienced, I would come to you and say, what do I do? How do I handle this? How do I manage this? And I think through that also we became even closer together.
Yeah, and so when I think about us, I mean, there are so many things I've learned from you. Just your willingness to embrace your faith, especially at a time in our country where being Muslim was not seen as an asset, and there was a lot of hate towards people of the Muslim faith, and yet you stepping into it even more strongly was so impressive to me, because I think, you know, I don't care what white Christian men say. You know, I just had somebody on Facebook say, we're being persecuted now, you know, as poor Christian white men and whatever. They have nothing on what the Muslim community goes through. And I just have watched you over the last 3 years, especially, really step in and go to the masjid and just really be available to your community. And that teaches me a lot about, you know, as a Christian, we take so much for granted about with our freedom. And I just so value watching you and your commitment. And even with a young child and struggling, I mean, we've had lots of conversations about going to masjid and feeling like you can't really engage because you have this little guy. And we're able to talk about those things, even though I'm not Muslim.
Yeah.
We can talk about the struggle.
I think what I've appreciated about you is like also this majority Christian faith, but that you're still able to be an ally, and you're still able to even come to my spaces, you know, and also like a lot of people think that, well, Christianity is the right way, and you're like, no, it's, I don't know, like I just remember some really deep conversations about like your faith and my faith, and it's really like the common thing is humanity, and like that's what we definitely agree. And like I believe in Jesus too, and I think that's the thing that people don't realize is like Jesus is one of our prophets, you know, one of the most respected prophets, so we do believe in him. But yeah.
When I think too, what I respect about you is, and what's common to both of us, is we value people. Yeah. And especially people who've been marginalized for whatever reason. Yeah. I mean, we have done a lot of work around whoever you happen to be who's marginalized. Like, we try to be allies and supports and think about and wrestle with things that, and think about how can we become better at what we do. And, but also realize we're human too, and we screw up sometimes, and how do we show grace and mercy?
I think the other thing too is like, here you are, this big like OSPI, your position, and I would come to you like, well, I don't have a PhD, I don't have a degree for this, Erin. How can I get in this school district? Help me out here. And like, you just made it so simple to that. It doesn't matter about that. It's the change that we're trying to do, and still encourage me to like, you know, even though I had people in the district that were like, well, you need this degree, you need this, but we were like, nope, we're going to still, we both don't have PhD degrees. Right. And I feel like to get in those higher institutions, you have to, but we've managed to.
We have.
I mean.
Because we have the same degree at this point. Yep. Right? And because I remember being at your last day of class at Evergreen.
I agree. My graduation.
Yeah, I remember that. And we have the same degree. And so it's not about degrees, it's about, I mean, I think sometimes degrees, it's jumping through hoops. Right?
It's the lived experience. See, people think that degrees is somehow higher than the lived experiences that we've had, and that's what you've always brought to what we offer and what our purpose is in life, is to use our lived experiences to make change happen, you know, and to encourage people's humanity by sharing our lived experiences. Yeah.
So I would love for you to share a little bit. So we had this really cool opportunity. She and I were the keynote speakers at a conference.
Yesterday and
she was yesterday. I was today at the same conference. So it's the coolest thing to see the conference poster, and it's her next to me, which is really kind of awesome. But I'd love for you to share kind of a summary of what you talked about yesterday, because I think it gets at, like, each of us has different lived experience, and we have different lanes that we run in. Yeah. And yet we're able to bring that together when we need to.
So, well, one thing about being two keynote speakers at the same conference, I have felt through the years that we are just like speaking and making a difference everywhere else, all the other states, internationally, and never in our own backyard. And how cool was it that we were like keynote speakers
right down the street,
right down the street in our own backyard. That's pretty amazing, because as professional speakers, people don't in your own community see us that way. They have to go to California, to New York, and pay tens and thousands of dollars to bring people, when we have amazing, incredible voices and lived experiences right here. So yesterday, my keynote was about me immigrating to this country with my family, and how, we were promised this opportunity to come to America by this rich old white guy. And instead, when we came here, we were enslaved. We were hidden slaves in plain sight in a rural community of Oakville, Washington. And so I talked about my story and how we got out of that situation, and how that situation that happened, that sounds so horrendous to people, like, how can there still be slavery going on? It just looks different now. And I talked about my story and how it may sound really horrendous, but that it's still happening in our communities, and all 18 counties have been impacted, especially like the rural communities where people think it's safe. And really talked about the process in which human trafficking, slavery happens. How my story is really not that different than how it happens here, the whole grooming process and the opportunities that are promised that really don't happen for people, and why people need to have more training on trauma and exploitation, and especially this conference was all around youth, and why are youth, and for this, college students, so vulnerable for exploitation and abuse and human trafficking. And it's because, they're some of the most vulnerable people. When you think of college students, they're away from their family, they're gaining their independence, they don't know people, and so it's really easy to target college students and young people, because you're not really that confident in who you are, and you don't have that family support. So that's kind of what I talked about, and like what youth need. Like, really young people, college students need to work on their self-image, their self-esteem, their self-worth. Because I know through my story, nobody ever sat down with me to ask me, do I know who I am? Do I love myself? How would I even begin to do that? And in that, it's going to take a lot of patience, love, and compassion to help young people to gain their confidence and self-esteem, to help them thrive in their life. So that was the base of my keynote.
And I started
What
my
about
keynote
yours?
honoring her today and her awesome food, which we just ate tonight. So she makes a mean curry, and I could eat it all day, every day. But I talked about her and just how fun it was to be on the same stage that she had been on. But I talked about my personal story of being adopted in the U.S. and then raised overseas, and then coming back to America, hoping to get a degree that would take me to the United Nations back home in the Netherlands, and realizing that this country was not the same for white people as it was for black people. And it, I'd watched The Cosby Show and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, so in my mind, in the late 80s, that's what America was going to be like for black people. And I got here, and it was such a rude awakening. And I almost committed suicide, and had to really find myself, and I really, on my own, because we didn't, much like you, I was separated from my family, and we didn't have internet and all that stuff, so I couldn't talk to my parents, and had a revelation really as a freshman in college that instead of going and doing law, I needed to stay in America and become a teacher, because kids here didn't have the same kinds of champions that I had growing up. And that was 30 years ago, and I talked a lot in my story about the need for grace and mercy in this work. That it's easy to get caught up in hate, but hate just destroys you. Yeah. Grace and mercy gives you room to teach.
Empower to move. Yeah.
And I talked about the power of story and how each of us has a story, and the story is what connects us, right? It's those connections between how my parents and your parents are both white. Your American parents are white people, and mine are, and the similarities and differences, right?
I know.
But it's the telling of our story that brought us together and helped us, and how right now we don't take time to tell our stories.
No, let's just post it on Facebook or, the thing is, I think it's the vulnerability part. We don't want to be vulnerable for other people. We don't want to really tell our stories, or if we're struggling with anything. So we go through life navigating, wearing these different masks all the time. And young people, college students are taught that you have to become this way, when really through life it's about unbecoming. The stories that you have been told over and over and over. I'm sure you have adoption stories that you have played in your head over and over, and I think it's really about, Michelle Obama talks about becoming, but I think the true mercy and grace is about yourself and your journey of unbecoming all the stories that you've been told, and being able to actually own your stories and tell those stories, and being vulnerable for people, because that's when real human connection happens, is when we can take those masks off and show our true colors. And I've just been grateful that I've been able to do that with you.
I know we've shared some pretty raw stories that we're not sharing with you. But we both know some pretty deep things about each other, and when we've both been in the most hurting places, we've been here for each other.
And it's easy to isolate yourself and I don't want to be that negative Nancy and bring you down or pour my energy. But what I have found is me being vulnerable and saying, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I'm stuck with. It helps me, it lifts me up more to just unpack that baggage and know you don't have to fix me. And you've never tried to fix me or solve, or why don't you do this? And that's one thing I've always appreciated about you, is that you don't try to have a solution. But just listening, that's one of the biggest things with our friendship, and what I encourage people to do is to be able to listen. You don't need to have a problem and solution for everything. So what is something that you think these students need to know? What's a parting thought for them that they don't know about you yet, that they really need to know? And where could they find you if they want to reach out for? I think one of the biggest things for me is I've had a real traumatic childhood and even my early adult life. And you touch on one of your keynotes with this. It's not about your past. It's about where you're going. Maybe I'm not saying it correctly, but it's not about where you start. It's about where you finish. Yeah, and I think that a lot of times we allow our stories, we allow our past to dictate how we show up today or tomorrow. And I just want to tell all of you to let go of that. Your past does not define how you wake up in the morning and how you show up for your fellow students, for your teacher, for your family. That yes, you may have had a painful past, you may have had things that have happened to you, but don't let that get in the way of not being vulnerable, to not take off your mask, and that you do have people, if you reach out and allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I'm in Lacey. I live right up the street from you. So if they want to get in touch with me, you can get in touch with her, or you can find me on my Facebook. Is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. And if you go back to your college, I really would highly recommend that, that I can come out to your school and do some kind of keynote speaker. Do some kind of, training or awareness around why college students are so vulnerable for trafficking and exploitation and violence. I think that would probably be a gift to me, is allowing me to come to your school and talk about that, because there's such a high rate of college students being exploited, and I would love to be part of the prevention with that. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to leave my comments for them in person. So I will see you all tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you so much. I love you. I wish I could be there with you all in person, but I have a 3-year-old and a 17-year-old that I got to do mommy duty for. So I know y'all understand, and hope you enjoy the conference, because I've been there four times in the prior year. So yeah, make it the best, put your all into it, and you'll get a lot out of it, and make connections with people that you may have never thought you would connect with. That's all. Yeah.